What's up, Walking Dead friends and family? It's Brian Castrillo back with another review. This is for Fear the Walking Dead, episode 10, titled Morning Cloak. And this was a very interesting episode. I wouldn't say it's my favorite episode, but it does kind of push characters in a certain direction, and I'm going to kind of get into that. But we start off, and you see a new character named Ali. And of course, he's played by Ashton Arbab. If I apologize if I'm saying that wrong, but he's looking at some butterflies that he's got, caught in a jar or whatever. But ultimately, he starts talking to Howard. And Howard, of course, is, Victor Strand's first, second in command there. And that's basically his right-hand man, essentially. And he's talking to Ali, and Ali's basically wanting to become one of Victor's rangers. He wants to go out and do, these different jobs. He doesn't want to just keep looking for butterflies. He doesn't understand, what's going on. And there's an interesting moment where you got John Dory Sr. He kind of sort of butts in, and he's basically saying when he was a cop and that, he basically insinuating there's like hazing that goes on, and that just kind of, steps in the ranks. But Howard cuts him off there and says, this isn't about hazing. This is bigger. I want to see how you see the world, because you're basically saying you're either a butterfly or, a caterpillar. And he's talking about how people can change and what, and how they view the world, because of course a caterpillar starts out and eventually puts itself in a cocoon and turns into this butterfly, one of the coolest things in nature. But then he sends him out to get this butterfly called a morning cloak. And he goes out and he catches this butterfly, he kills a walker, and then he meets up with Charlie, who they get into this fight. And then you see Howard and John Dory Sr. with some other guys, and they catch them. And then they take him back to the tower. And you got when they get back, Charlie is, Howard's trying to figure out, why are you here? He wants to know, what, did Morgan send you? What's going on? And Charlie's trying to demand to talk to the Strand, but Howard's like, no. And Charlie basically said she wanted to sneak in because she wants a chance at a normal life. She's only 13, and we learned that Ali is 15. But Charlie wants a chance at a normal life. She's sick of going out running for fighting these walkers, getting in these battles, these wars and everything. Of course, we know she killed Nick, and she's grown up in this apocalypse and had to do very adult things, and she wants a chance to kind of live a little bit of normalcy, or at least that's what she's telling Howard. And then Howard basically he wants to send her out on this mission, and this mission to get these elevator parts, because of course in the previous episode the elevators were destroyed by the stalkers. And she's like, I'll do it. And of course June is against that, but she doesn't like it, but she doesn't really fight against it. And he sends Ali with her, and he basically pulls her aside and says, find out what she's doing. Why is she here? What's her ulterior motive? Then we come in and we find in another room, they're called, where June is helping one of Victor's guys, Garcia, who had a lot of radiation burns. And this, of course, plays back, I think, into the previous episode where we had all these walkers in this pit that was from one of the nuclear missiles that were on, the USS Pennsylvania. And which we do find out later that Victor is sending people over to this pit. But they weren't really able to save him, and then they bring him up to the roof, and they throw him over the side. And so Ali and Charlie, they go out on this mission, and they're starting to, well, Charlie's kind of bringing kind of like that moral compass. And again, if you're a Walking Dead universe fan, you know about that moral compass. But saying, why do you just collect these butterflies and just put them in jars, And he's telling her how, they don't live that long. And she's like, yeah, but shouldn't they get a chance to live no matter how long it is? And just kind of guiding him through this moral compass, and where he is like fixated on, doing what Victor needs, so that way he can get in a good position with them. And so they come across this this building. It's an old bowling alley. They first see stalkers and they run in the bowling alley, and we're kind of seeing these teenagers who really clearly didn't have anything. They didn't get a chance to live that, teenage life that a lot of us got to live. And they're going through a lot of firsts, or they're realizing that they didn't have a lot of firsts. And Charlie's saying, I never got to learn how to play, to bowl. Can you teach me? And, he teaches her how to strike, but he doesn't want to. But she notices while these stalkers are, trying to get in, that he goes over and grabs a gun, and she's paying a lot of attention to what's going on. And she asks him, like, how did you know that gun was there, this and that? But ultimately, this story, or at least this scene right here, is bringing to this board that he had there, and it fixates on who we find out later is his dad, who was in the army. And at first, like, when I'm seeing, it seemed like he's trying to make amends, or try and look good within his father's eye. Now we find out later that he actually left his dad, and he just wants to make everything okay. So that's why he's working for Victor. Now they do they go into this building, and they eventually get these parts, and Charlie comes clean and says, I'm here for Morgan, and he wanted me to turn off the beacon lights, and she just wants to say, but that's not what I want to do. And you can clearly see that these two are starting to become a little bit closer. And Ali is kind of breaking from that hard exterior where he is just, basically kind of like a robot. And so they get the parts, and he locks her in this elevator, while these walkers that are in this other room are coming through. And he's basically telling Howard that, it's just me, I'm coming alone. And then Howard, you hear him saying how, I'm sure you did exactly what Victor would do. And of course, if we know Victor, he's an asshole, and he will kill anybody just to make himself look good, to do whatever is necessary. And if you ask Victor, of course, that's why he's still alive to this day. But he actually ends up coming back, and he saves her from where he trapped her in, and he explains to her that, I never, and he tells, that story that I told you about his dad, and how there's a lot of things he didn't experience, and he says, we can run away together, we can do this together. And he ultimately ends up kissing her, just a, one time kiss, and, that was her first kiss or whatever. He turns around and she faints on the ground. We pick up back in the tower, and we learn that she has a lot of radiation poisoning from this experience. But one thing I want to come back to that I thought was kind of cool about Ali is his name was Captain Muhammad, and the reason why he called him Ali, because he was a big boxing fan. So of course you got the Muhammad Ali reference right there. And Charlie is teaching him, like, through life, why life is important. To quote Morgan, I mean, she didn't say this, but all life is precious. And she's kind of teaching Ali to just realize that, we only have this one life, and we don't have to do what Victor wants us to do. But we get back to, the tower, and we learn that she has this poisoning, and June, when she comes out, she tells Ali that she doesn't have much time left, and it's good that she really relishes whatever time, like, make whatever time she has left really good with her. And then Ali comes back, he takes her out, he said, I want to show you something. And this was kind of cool. He brings her to this room, and we see, all these butterflies around, and she's sick. You can see it, her skin is starting to change. She's starting to get some of, not so much the boils, but you can see sort of almost like radiation taking its effect on her skin. But he helps her smile, and you could tell these two kids are really enjoying their time. These are two kids who never had a chance to date, and they're just, it's basically puppy love. But she tells him, as they're watching, outside, that I was supposed to I should still try and tell Morgan, that I'm okay, what's going on. And Ali, says that he'll do it. And he goes up to the roof. He's about to, turn the beacon off, and he gets caught by Howard, and he's ultimately killed and thrown over the roof. And, she has to watch this. She, of course, being Charlie, and she comes out crying. And June's like, what's wrong? And then, of course, Howard comes out of the elevator, and she says, you killed him. And this final scene is ultimate, because I was trying to figure out who is being pushed here. Who is this affecting? Whose character is going to be pushed in a direction because of what's going on here? The little relationship is cute, but what is going on? So, Howard comes in and he says, I had no choice, and, he attacked me, which I guess technically isn't wrong, but he was already threatened with guns. So, of course, Ali, who was afraid, he came and he did attack him, and ultimately Howard ended up killing him. And then he threatens Charlie. And this is a really badass June moment. June basically gets in his face, and I was, watching her right next to, Howard, and she is really intimidating. But Howard, of course, he has no fear, but she is very imposing in this scene. And I still believe that Howard has some sort of connection with something else. There's something that he has, but June basically says when Howard says, I'm gonna, take out Charlie, she says, no, you're not. And Howard, of course, is upset, and he basically, confronts June, and she says, well, he threatens her with Victor, and she says, it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, I have a skill that makes me more important than you. And of course, it puts Howard in check for a little bit. And she's talking about her medical skills and how if anything goes down, she's the only one who can help. And Howard backs off for a moment, but not before John Dory Sr. basically kind of stands his ground with him. And June's like, what the hell? But we learn later that he is trying to get in, Victor's ear, because he feels it has to be him. And then we got a parallel, because she mentions that, I thought the same thing with Virginia. And we all know how that went. But then he said, there's a scene where it basically goes with Charlie, and she's talking with Charlie, and keep in mind, remember that it looks like she's going to die, and we don't have this, much time left. And she basically makes a promise to Charlie that says, no matter how much time you have left, I'm going to make sure that you are here to see Victor fall. So again, not a lot of actions, but it does kind of push some characters forward. Now, if Charlie is going to die, what does that mean? Now, I don't know if she's going to die, but she's sick right now, or at least she's getting sick. But what does this mean? Now with June, let's look at June. June, of course, she lost her daughter to who is sick, her daughter died and ended up turning, and everyone at that FEMA camp or wherever that was ended up dying because of that. And this is, of course, haunted June all this time. And she's, of course, making this promise to Charlie. And what this is giving, what this episode gave, what this scene gave is hope. This gave them something to fight for. This gave them a reason to rally. And while there's not a lot of big moments in here, this last scene, this whole conversation with Howard, John Dory Sr., June, and Charlie, this gave hope. This gave them something to fight for. And this is what is going to propel them going into these future battles. However, this does change the dynamic with Madison coming back, because you got to bring up the fact that Charlie is the one that killed her son. So if we lose Charlie prior to Madison returning, what does that mean? Well, how is that going to, change the storyline? Because I feel like that is a big moment that, we need that Madison and Charlie moment. Now, what I think is going to happen if there is a Madison Charlie moment, I feel like it should go down where Madison kind of takes her under. Ultimately, she's mad at her, of course. I mean, that's her son Nick, who she absolutely adored. But I believe, and if you go back to that conversation where Madison had with Charlie when she was, of course, a younger girl at Diamond Stadium, I think that's going to play into this, and you're going to see Madison kind of look at her like her own, like a troubled youth, just like her son, and kind of take her under her wing as like one of her own. The question is does Charlie make it to that point? Because if she doesn't, and that could be like kind of a heartwarming moment, what does that mean for Madison's character? But the biggest thing to take from this is this gives our people from the inside hope and something to fight for. But what did you guys think? Did you enjoy this episode? What were your favorite parts? Are you nervous for Charlie like I am? What do you think of Howard? Of course, June called him a monster for what he did to Ali. But this, again, like not a lot of action, but a lot of interesting things happen. And I think this is meant to propel or prepare our family here and give them something to fight for. But my MVP for this episode, this was a tough one, but I'm going to give it to June Dory, of course, played by Jenna Elfman, because that final scene was just very riveting, very imposing, and she just really did a phenomenal job in this scene. I loved what everybody else gave to it. Of course, Howard, Charlie, they all did great, but June Dory's character in that scene was absolutely riveting. It was a great scene. I absolutely loved it, and that is going to be pivotal going forward in how our family goes. Now, I always do a shout out for when I do these reviews, and this is no different. This one is kind of a special one. This is going to my good friend, my brother, my family, Mark O'Brien. He does have a podcast now. This is one of the my Navy brothers. I served with him on the USS Constitution, and he is one of the guys that when I got there, now there's a few that really stood out for me when I got there and really kind of showed me how to be a leader, how to be a team player, how to really do well within the Navy and at this command in particular. And he's a great father. If you know him, you can see this on the social media, and he's a great friend. He's a very good role model, and I'm honored to even know him. But he has his podcast, and it's called the Mob Podcast, and Mob, of course, stands for Mark O'Brien, and this is on Mixcloud. And I want to read a quote from something that he put on a post of him on Instagram, and he has his hat on, he's kind of leaning up against the wall, he's got the cool look going. But I want to read this. I wrote it down so I can get it correctly. And he said, "We started the podcast back in the beginning of 2019 because I have a great group of people in my life whose stories and backgrounds should be documented. The subject is dependent upon whom I'm speaking with, so there is a little bit of everything for you to pick and choose." Now, Mark is a great speaker. He's very intelligent, and he has a lot to say, and this is a great podcast, and it would mean the world to me if you guys can go check him out. Give him a follow on Mixcloud. Of course, his information is down there. I'm going to put his Instagram as well as a link to the Mixcloud for his podcast. Give it a listen. You'll hear some great interviews, some great conversations. You'll learn about Old Ironsides, the USS Constitution, where we both served together. Of course, that's the oldest commissioned warship afloat in the world today, and it fought in the War of 1812 and has some amazing battles in her history. And Mark is an amazing man, and get to know him. Check out that podcast. As always, thank you guys for watching. I love you guys. Until next week.